Hey yo, it's Alex from Audio Issues, and this video is a wrap up to our ongoing EQ series where we dove super deep into understanding the foundational techniques, understanding the language and the jargon behind EQ as we covered a broad range of subjects and topics around EQ. So if you haven't watched that EQ series yet, I suggest you start at the beginning and we'll link it in the card above. And we've been doing this alongside with the Audio Issues EQ. So if you haven't checked out the Audio Issues EQ yet, I highly encourage you to check it out and the link is in the description below. So in this video, I just kind of want to wrap up everything we've covered about the EQ and just give you some best overall practices to help you on your ongoing journey to making better mixes. So throughout this series, we learned how to use an EQ. We learned how to boost frequencies, how to cut frequencies, how to filter out frequencies, as well as the language that is coupled with different areas of the frequency spectrum. So we learned how the low end, in terms of problems, we'll be talking about sub, boom, or muddiness. And then we get to the low mids, we talk about boxy, cheap, nasal when we get to the mids. And then we get to the high mids, we get to harsh, piercing, sibilant, or overhyped is the typical language we'll see when we're talking about problem areas in terms of EQ. On the flip side, when we talk about accentuating things with the EQ, we talked about thump, punch, warmth, weight, tone, attitude, bite, presence, air, so on and so forth as characteristic words to describe things that we want to enhance in our music. We also covered all the typical, most common problems that you will see in each section of the frequency spectrum. All right, so I have a jam loaded up into Ableton here. It sounds something like this. And for now, I've loaded an EQ onto my drum track. So I'm just going to solo it for now. And let's talk about some of the things we covered in this series. So first and foremost, we learned that we can boost frequencies or cut frequencies in any range that we want on the EQ to either remove conflicting or masking frequencies in a common problematic area, such as the muddy area or the boomy area in the low end. Or sometimes the mids get a little harsh, a little bit of piercing. So sometimes we might want to cut out of here. Alternatively, we can boost with an EQ, right? So maybe we want more presence on our drums. Bring up those mids, those high mids. Or maybe we want a little bit more weight in the kick of our drums. We also learned that we can filter with an EQ. So if you hold Option and click on these outer nodes on the Audio Issues EQ, you can activate a filter. So this is a low pass filter. If we want to filter out all the high end frequencies, bring them back in. We can also do the same thing, but with a high pass filter by activating it over here and dragging it up to filter out all the low frequencies, just leaving the higher frequencies. And this is a super powerful tool to use to make room in your mix. We also learned that we have shelving, so we can boost or cut everything above or below a certain point on our frequency spectrum. So this is really handy if you want to, for example, boost all the high end of an instrument from a certain point and above to really give like a nice high-end bouquet of sound. You can also do the same thing if you maybe want to cut all the low end out of a certain part without filtering it. You can use a low end shelf or something like that. So in general, EQ will be your most used tool to get pro sounding mixes in your home studio, because this one tool does so many things. It can filter out unnecessary information that might be competing with other instruments. It might be extra low end in some of your instruments. It might be too much high end stuff going on in some of your mid-range instruments, your vocals, whatever it may be. And you can really carve out room for everything to sit in your mix with EQ. On the flip side, we can also use EQ to really enhance and accentuate the qualities that we want to display in the mix. So if you have a guitar solo that's really raunchy and has like a certain character to it, you can really enhance that with EQ. Or if your vocal, you want it to be very airy and very beautiful in the high end, we can enhance that with EQ. And in general, when we're mixing, just with balancing your levels, using the stereo field with panning and EQing your tracks, you can get 80% of the way there with your mix, with special attention to EQing and listening for masking frequencies and accentuating the gold that's happening in your mix. So all that to say is that the more you practice using EQ and hearing the different frequency spectrum and different frequency ranges as you affect them, the better and better you will get at mixing. And you'll become more and more familiar with the language we use around EQ in general. If something's sounding too nasal, if something's sounding too boomy, if you want some more presence to your sound, it'll become second nature. And you'll already start to hear where those frequency ranges are and what elements they enhance with various sounds, as well as how those various sections of EQ sound with specific instruments. So you might learn that 200 hertz has a certain quality to a snare, a certain low end presence, or that 8K has a certain kind of snap, or that the 1000 hertz on a snare has a lot of that body and the main attack, the tone of the snare. You'll learn that maybe around 80 hertz has a lot of the sub range of your kick drum or your bass guitar, or that 1000 hertz and above, 2000 hertz might have the pick attack of your bass guitar. So I sincerely hope that this EQ series will help you with your productions. And I know from personal experience how much better your mixes will sound the more and more you familiarize yourself with the EQ and you master this tool and you tune your ear to being able to hear these various moves that you're making in the frequency spectrum. So if you haven't had the chance to check out the Audio Issues EQ plugin yet, I highly encourage you to. It's a super awesome plugin and tool, and you can find more about it in the description below. And if you have any questions about EQ or specific use cases for EQ within your mix, feel free to drop a comment below and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So thank you for watching. Now go use your newfound EQ skills to start making better mixes.